All right, so are you ready to get a little philosophical today?
Always up for a good mind bender.
Today, we're doing a deep dive into a single source.
Just one this time.
Yeah, it's a transcript, actually. It dives right into this idea that you were never born and you'll never die.
Okay, that's a pretty bold statement right out of the gate.
It is, and honestly, it makes you rethink some pretty big questions about, like, what it means to even exist.
Well, I'm intrigued. Where does this transcript even start with an idea like that?
Right, so it starts with this analogy of a wave and the ocean. It says we tend to see ourselves as these like individual waves, separate and distinct. But what if we're more like the ocean itself?
Connected in ways we don't even fully grasp.
Exactly.
So then where does the whole never born, never die thing fit into that?
Well, that's where things get really interesting. The transcript goes on to talk about how everything about us, our bodies, our thoughts, even our feelings are constantly changing.
Which is true when you think about it.
Right. But then that's where I started to get a little tripped up. If everything's always in flux, how can we even pin down a sense of self?
Yeah, like who or what is the me that's experiencing all of this change?
Exactly.
Okay, so how does the transcript address that?
Well, it introduces this concept of awareness. Think of it like the space in a room. Furniture comes and goes, people move around, but the space itself always remains.
So awareness is like that constant backdrop, even amidst all the change.
Yeah, it's not our thoughts or our feelings or even our sensations. It's that space that holds it all.
So is that what they're saying is our true nature, this awareness?
That's what it seems like. And it's not something we have to create or achieve. It's already here, always present.
Well, that sounds promising.
Right. And you know what? The transcript even gives this exercise to try so you can like tap into that awareness more directly.
Okay, I'm all ears.
They say to just pay attention to your breath. Just feel the sensation of breathing without trying to change it or anything.
Simple enough. I like it.
I actually tried it earlier, and I gotta say,
What? Did you reach enlightenment?
not quite.
Oh.
I mean, I still felt like me was the one, ordering pizza for lunch.
Well, hey, awareness needs fuel too, right?
Right. But maybe it's a sign I need more practice.
Maybe so. But it's not about erasing your personality or anything.
Right. That's what I was wondering, too.
It's more like this awareness is the foundation, like the ground of being, and everything else, thoughts, emotions, even pizza cravings, kind of arise from that.
Okay, I can see that. But then the transcript takes it even further.
Further, how much further can you go with no self?
Oh, just wait.
Yeah.
It starts talking about how we can actually live without this constant voice of the ego, the I, that's always narrating our lives.
Okay, now hold on. What does that even mean? Like, does I just disappear?
That's what I was wondering, too.
Yeah. I mean, who orders the pizza then?
Right. So they use this analogy of a self-driving car.
Okay, how does that work?
It's like we're so used to this idea of I being the driver, right? But what if life is more like a self-driving car? We're still here experiencing the ride, but maybe there's not this separate me in control.
Okay, I think I'm starting to follow.
But then that brings up a whole bunch of other questions, like who's making decisions then? Who's responsible for our actions? If there's no me calling the shots, how do we even function in the world?
Right. That's a good point.
So the transcript brings in another analogy, a river.
Oh, this should be good. Hit me with the river analogy.
They're saying actions and choices still happen, but they're not necessarily driven by this controlling ego. It's like a river flowing, right? It encounters obstacles, changes direction, but it's not like there's this little river self steering the whole thing.
So it's more organic than that?
Yeah.
Okay, I kind of get that. But wouldn't that make us passive? Like we're just drifting along, letting life happen to us?
That's what I was thinking too.
Like, are we just along for the ride then?
Yeah. And actually, the transcript addresses that directly.
What do they say?
It says it's not about becoming passive. It's about like shifting our understanding of what it means to act.
Okay, so how do we do that?
Well, they use the example of a dancer.
A dancer.
Yeah. Think about it. A dancer isn't rigidly controlling every muscle, right? There's a flow, a responsiveness to the music and their partner.
I guess that's true.
So are they saying we should just stop making plans, stop setting goals?
That's a good question.
Right. Like, what does that even look like in real life?
Well, the transcript says it's not necessarily about giving up on goals altogether. It's more about recognizing that there's a deeper intelligence at work, something beyond our limited egoic minds. And they're saying when we align ourselves with that, there's a sense of effortlessness, even in the midst of challenges.
Okay, I'm starting to get a glimpse of this.
Yeah.
But this idea of no self, it's still kind of mind-boggling. Like, who's writing this podcast script? Who's even thinking these thoughts right now?
Right. Like, it feels like we're contradicting ourselves here.
Exactly.
Well, remember that room analogy we were talking about earlier?
The one with the furniture and stuff.
Yeah, that one. The space is always there, but it's not the furniture.
Right.
So they're saying our true nature is that spacious awareness.
Okay.
And thoughts and feelings are like those pieces of furniture. They come and go, but they don't define the space itself.
So it's not like I disappear completely.
It's more like I is seen through.
Seen through.
Yeah, like it becomes less solid, less central to our experience. And the transcript argues that this shift in perspective can actually lead to a deeper sense of freedom and peace.
That sounds pretty appealing, honestly.
Uh-huh.
But what about all those doubts that come up? Like, if there's no self, how can I even be sure I exist?
I mean, doesn't that thought in itself prove you exist?
I guess so.
Mm.
But then what about meaning and purpose? If I'm not this separate individual striving to achieve things, doesn't life just become meaningless?
Well, the transcript says true meaning doesn't actually come from achievements or like external things. It comes from just being present, you know?
Being present.
Yeah. It's like when you're watching a sunset, you're not trying to achieve anything. You're just fully experiencing the beauty of that moment.
Okay, yeah, I get that. But then there's this whole other part of the transcript that I'm really having trouble wrapping my head around. The idea that, you were never born.
Ah, yes. That one tends to throw people for a loop.
Like, come on. I have a birth certificate. I have baby pictures. How can they say I wasn't born?
Right.
It just doesn't make sense.
It's not really about denying your personal history or even the fact that you have a physical body,
Okay.
The transcript is pointing to something deeper, something beyond like our normal understanding of time and space.
Deeper.
It's like saying a character in a movie wasn't really born just because they appear on screen.
Okay, I see what you're saying. So then if we weren't really born, what does that mean about death?
That's where things get really mind-bending. They argue that if we were never truly born, then we can never truly die.
Wait, what?
Our true essence, that awareness we were talking about, it's beyond the cycle of birth and death.
Wow. Okay. That's a lot to process.
Yeah.
But honestly, there's something kind of liberating about that idea.
Right.
Takes some of the fear out of death, I guess.
Exactly. The transcript says the fear of death is actually rooted in this illusion of a separate self.
Okay.
When we cling to this idea of me, we naturally fear losing it.
That makes sense.
But if we realize our true nature is beyond that, then death becomes less of a threat.
Okay, I like that. So the transcript actually spends quite a bit of time addressing doubts and misconceptions about this whole no-self idea.
It does. It seems like they knew people would struggle with it.
Right. They totally did. Like, one of the biggest questions people have is, if there's no separate self, then who is experiencing all of that?
Yeah, that's a big one.
Like, who is feeling these feelings, making these choices, living this life?
It's like if there is no me, then who is doing all the doing?
Exactly.
And the transcript points out that life itself is unfolding perfectly fine without the need for a separate me to be in control.
Well, yeah, I guess that's true.
Like, think about it. Your heart beats, your lungs breathe, your body heals, all without any, conscious effort on your part.
Yeah, I guess that is pretty amazing. But it still feels weird to think about,
It does. It's a different way of looking at things. The transcript wants us to shift our perspective, move from I'm doing to more of a life is happening kind of thing.
Life is happening. Okay. So it's not that I'm making my heart beat. It's more like the beating is just happening and I'm aware of it.
Yeah, something like that.
Huh. Okay. I'm trying to wrap my head around that. But then if I'm not in control, if life is happening, then what about, responsibility?
Oh, yeah, that's another big one. People get tripped up on that.
Like, if there's no me making choices, then how can I be held accountable for my actions?
Right.
It doesn't quite add up, does it?
No, it's tricky. But the transcript says that even though there may not be a separate self, quote unquote, me calling the shots,
Yeah.
our actions still have consequences. They compare it to that river analogy again.
Okay, the river, right.
It might not be consciously choosing its path, but it still shapes the landscape around it.
Okay, so even though there's no separate self, we still impact the world.
Exactly. And they actually say that understanding this leads to a deeper sense of responsibility.
Deeper.
Because it's no longer about blaming or praising a separate self.
I see what you're saying.
It's about recognizing the interconnectedness of everything and acting accordingly.
It's like realizing that our actions are ripples in a pond, and those ripples affect everything around us.
That's a great way to put it. And that brings up another point that the transcript emphasizes.
Is that?
Compassion.
Compassion.
Yeah.
Hmm.
When we see through the illusion of a separate self, we realize we're all interconnected, all part of the same, web of life.
So hurting another person is ultimately hurting ourselves.
In a way, yeah. And they say that understanding this allows compassion to arise naturally. You start to see the world through a lens of kindness and understanding.
Okay, but doesn't that make it hard to set boundaries
Boundaries.
or to stand up for ourselves when we need to?
Ah, that's a good question.
If we're all one, doesn't that mean we just let people walk all over us?
Well, the transcript clarifies that compassion doesn't mean being a doormat.
Oh, good.
It's about recognizing the shared humanity in everyone, even those who might be causing us harm.
So setting boundaries with compassion.
Yeah. Not out of anger or fear. It's understanding that even those who harm us are often acting out of their own, pain and confusion.
I never thought of it that way.
It's a different perspective, right? And it doesn't excuse their actions, but it allows us to respond with more wisdom and clarity.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this all fits together, But I have to admit, this whole idea of no self is still a lot to wrap my head around.
Oh, it is.
It's heavy stuff.
It challenges everything we think we know about ourselves and the world.
It does. And the transcript actually acknowledges that. It says, this is a journey, not a destination.
I like that.
It's about continuing to question, to explore, and to deepen our understanding.
Exactly. We don't have to have all the answers right now.
Oh, good. That takes the pressure off. I was starting to feel like I was failing at this whole no-self thing.
No, not at all. The transcript even says that the search for truth is actually a process of unlearning.
Unlearning.
Yeah, letting go of old beliefs and assumptions that no longer serve us.
So it's not about adding more knowledge. It's about clearing space for a new way of seeing things.
Yeah. And they compare it to cleaning out a cluttered room. It can be messy and chaotic in the process.
Right.
But the end result is a sense of spaciousness and clarity.
Okay, that's a great analogy. So it's like we're clearing out the mental clutter so we can see more clearly what's already there.
Exactly. And one more thing, they say this isn't a solo journey.
It's enough.
Yep. We can support each other in this process of unlearning and rediscovering our true nature.
Well, that's reassuring. It feels good to know we're not alone in this.
Not at all. The transcript reminds us that we're all interconnected and that we can learn from each other's experiences and insights.
So I feel like we've really gone deep on this transcript.
Yeah, we have. This idea of no self, it's pretty mind-blowing.
It really is. It's definitely shifted my perspective on, myself and life in general.
Yeah, it makes you question a lot of things, doesn't it?
It does. Like, I keep coming back to this idea that maybe true freedom comes from letting go of that need to always define and defend this separate me.
Yeah, the transcript talks a lot about that, letting go of the ego.
Right. What if we're actually part of something much bigger than we realize, like so much more interconnected?
The transcript argues that recognizing that interconnectedness is what can lead to more compassion, not just towards others, but towards ourselves too.
Right. Because if we're all part of the same whole, then hurting someone else is ultimately like hurting ourselves.
Exactly.
But I still wonder about, responsibility. If there's no me calling the shots, who's accountable for our actions?
That's a common question, and the transcript actually addresses it pretty directly.
They do.
Yeah. They say even though there may not be a separate me making choices, our actions still have consequences.
Okay, but how does that work if there's no me?
Well, think of it like a ripple effect. Even a small action can have far-reaching impacts. We might not always see those impacts, but they're still there.
So it's not about denying our individual agency. It's more about understanding that our actions are always part of a larger web of cause and effect.
Exactly.
Okay, I'm starting to see that.
And the transcript suggests that recognizing this interconnectedness can actually lead to a deeper sense of responsibility.
Really?
Yeah. Because we see that our choices have consequences, not just for ourselves, but for everyone and everything around us.
It's like realizing that we're all in this together, right? And that our actions matter.
Exactly. And that brings up another point that the transcript makes. The importance of living with intention.
Intention.
Yeah. If our actions are ripples, then we want to make sure those ripples are creating positive change in the world.
That makes sense. But how do we live with intention if there's no separate me making choices?
Well, the transcript emphasizes the importance of aligning ourselves with our values, with what's truly important to us.
Our values.
Yeah. They say when we do that, our actions naturally flow from a place of integrity and purpose.
So it's about tapping into that deeper intelligence.
Exactly, that awareness that's beyond our egoic minds.
But all those doubts still creep in sometimes. Like, what if there's no self? How can I be sure I exist? And what if life just becomes meaningless without a separate me striving for something?
Those are big questions,
Yeah.
and the transcript doesn't shy away from them.
So how do they answer them?
Well, they remind us that the very act of questioning, of wondering, is proof enough that there's something here experiencing.
That's a good point.
And as for meaning, they suggest that true meaning comes not from achieving or acquiring, but from simply being present, fully experiencing life in each moment.
So it's not about the destination. It's about the journey.
Exactly.
I feel like we've been conditioned to believe that happiness is something we have to chase after, something we have to earn.
Yeah, the transcript talks about that too, that we're always looking outside of ourselves for happiness.
Right. But what if it's already here within us,
Yeah.
just waiting to be discovered?
That's exactly the point they're making. We don't need to add anything to ourselves to be whole. We already are. It's about letting go of all those layers of conditioning and belief that obscure that truth.
It's like peeling away the layers of an onion.
Exactly. And what's at the center? Pure awareness, pure being.
Wow. It's a pretty radical idea.
It is.
But honestly, there's something about it that resonates with me, like a deep knowing that's always been there, but I'm only just now starting to glimpse.
And the transcript reminds us that this journey of awakening isn't a solitary pursuit. We're all in this together, supporting each other along the way.
So it's not about becoming some kind of isolated hermit or guru on a mountaintop. It's about bringing this understanding into our everyday lives,
Exactly. Our relationships, our work, our communities.
living from a place of greater awareness, compassion, and connection.
And in doing so, contributing to a more awakened world.
I love that. That's a beautiful message.
It is.
So for anyone listening, if this deep dive has sparked something in you, if you're feeling curious to explore these ideas further, don't hesitate to reach out. We'd love to hear from you.
And remember, the journey of self-discovery is an ongoing process. There's no right or wrong way to do it. Just trust your own inner wisdom, be patient with yourself, and keep exploring.
Thanks for joining us on this mind-bending adventure. Until next time, keep diving deep.